Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite categories of games. It's not really a mechanism, it's more of a category, and that is rewarding games. So games that frequently and constantly reward you for the actions you take or whatever you're doing in that game, and really for this purpose of this list, never penalize you. They never take away points. They never present opportunities for negative player interaction. They never stop your progression and reverse your progression. You're always moving forward in these games, always getting more and better stuff. And I love these games. I always feel good when I play rewarding games, and so I wanted to talk about them on a top 10 list today. This is a design philosophy that I use for a lot of the games that I design and develop for Stonemaier Games, including, here's a few examples, a couple that I didn't bring up here. One is Viticulture. Viticulture is very much a rewarding game. You're constantly getting stuff in Viticulture. You're constantly moving forward. Wingspan, same thing in Wingspan. Between Two Cities, same thing there. And then two examples that I have in front of me. Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, you're constantly moving forward and expanding and getting better, more and better stuff in Between Two Castles. And then in my game that I designed, Tapestry. Tapestry is a game about forward progression. You're always moving forward. You're getting better. You're getting more stuff, getting multiple benefits, often multiple benefits on the same turn. And even in Skye, the Skye does have a little bit of combat that can have you reverse your fortunes temporarily. But in Skye, almost all the actions you take have at least the potential to give you two benefits, which feels even better than getting just one benefit in a game. When you do something and you get not one, but two benefits. And Skye, I kind of designed it around that concept. Some games that were very close to qualifying for this list, but didn't quite because I really tried to stick very strictly to the idea of games that are constantly rewarding, were A Feast for Odin, which has instances where maybe you don't quite succeed on a skill test, Lords of Waterdeep, which has a few intrigue cards that have some negative player interactions, Azul Summer Pavilion, very rewarding game, but you actually can get negative points at times in this game. Seven Wonders, very close to making this list, but with the military aspect of Seven Wonders, which doesn't even feel bad, but if you lose a military battle in Seven Wonders, you can lose victory points. Clank, again, very rewarding game, but you can die in Clank, and you can have your health damaged throughout the game by the bag building mechanism. Dune Imperium, very rewarding game, but there is a little bit of combat in it, so I didn't count it. Hallertau and another one on here that I'll mention in a second, very close to making it. Hallertau is the newest game from Uwe Rosenberg, and the closest, I think, to an Uwe Rosenberg farming game that could qualify for this list, because a lot of his farming games are about feeding your people. Hallertau is not about that. However, he does something kind of clever in it, where instead of having to feed, he encourages you very strongly to get certain resources every round so that you can advance your house on the top of your player mat. And if you don't do that, I don't think you stand much of a chance at all of winning. I think you almost have to do that a certain amount throughout the game. So because the game is forcing you to do something in those regards, I didn't qualify for this list, but it's very close. Quacks of Quedlinberg is the closest I think you can come to a push your luck game that is rewarding, even though you can push your luck too far and not get what you want, but still get one of the things you want. Because if you push your luck too far in Quacks of Quedlinberg, you still get to choose either points or resources. You just don't get both if you bust. Everdell came very close as well. Everdell is a wonderfully rewarding game in many, many different ways, but there are surprisingly a few negative player interaction cards in Everdell that we may just remove. We played the other day and we just removed those cards. Tokaido, similar to Hallertau, Tokaido is consistently rewarding throughout the game, except when you stop at the inns, because if you don't have enough, I believe, money that you pay at the inns, then you miss out on the benefit that you would get there, and that can feel a little punishing. So it feels like something that you have to do in the game. You have to get that money so you can afford your options at the end. But I could be wrong about that. I might be remembering that incorrectly. And last, Isle of Cats. Isle of Cats, same again, game was probably the closest of any of these to making the list. But in Isle of Cats, if you don't cover up the rats on your ship, you lose points at the end of the game. So it has a small potential for negative points, even though it doesn't feel all that punishing at all. Honorable mentions that did qualify, but just weren't quite in my top 10, my personal top 10, were Gizmos, It's a Wonderful World, Le Havre, Concordia, The Whatnot Cabinet, Praga Caput Regni, probably the most recent addition to this list, definitely qualifies. Praga Caput Regni is very much a rewarding game with lots of double benefits. Maybe just a little too heavy for me for my top 10. Potion Explosion, Carcassonne, Isle of Skye, Terra Mystica, and Splendor. let's jump into the top 10 list itself now. At number 10 is Fantastic Factories. This is a engine building game where you're using dice and these cards that on which you usually are kind of placing dice or applying dice to these cards to build your engine. And every turn you take in Fantastic Factories, you improve your engine. You're getting better and better, you're getting stronger and stronger. Everything you gain in the game just makes you feel rewarded because you're getting constantly more and more stuff. Every die roll can be good or is good for some reason. It can be better, it can always be better, but it is always, there's something that you can do with those dice. So you're just constantly rewarded by the game, never punished, and there's no negative player interaction at all, always moving forwards. Just a wonderful dice placement engine building game, Fantastic Factories. At number 9 on the list is one that I really came very close to. This and Splendor were very, very close, but I lean towards this, Project L. So in Project L, it doesn't really have a back of the box for me to show you what's in this game, but in Project L, you are taking little polyomino tiles and placing them into dual-layered, they're like player mats, but they're tiles. They're dual-layered tiles, and you're taking these tokens and you're fitting them in so that you can complete a shape. So here, if this were a tile, then I would be trying to place tokens in here to complete this shape. And once you do that, you get to keep the tokens that you placed in there. A mistake that I made the first time I played. You don't discard those tokens. You keep the tokens that you placed in here, and you get a little benefit on this specific tile. The tile says you gain like this new token, and that most tiles are also worth points. And so every time you complete a tile, it feels better and better because you're keeping all the stuff that you already gained, and then you're gaining new stuff, new tokens that you can use for the next tile. And there's also very rewarding turns in this game because one of the actions that you can take once per turn is to place a token on all of your tiles. So there's a reason to kind of have a bunch of different tiles going at any given time so that you can use a single action to place multiple tokens across all those tiles. Project L, very rewarding game, always feeling like you're moving forward, and I've had a lot of fun ever since I figured out that you get to keep those tokens after you place them in the tiles. That's my number 9, Project L. And number 8 is a game that's similar similar game to Tokaido, hard to say that back to back, and that is Parks. Another game with a one-way action selection track where you are choosing an action of your choice. Choose whatever you want that's available on this track here. Actually, they do show to the back of the box here on Parks. So see how these little workers here? You're looking forward on this track and choosing the spot that's available. So very friendly, very easy. You can look ahead and choose the spot you want. In multiplayer games, you can put a token even if there is a meeple already there. And you're just always advancing on this track, always moving forward, always getting something that, not necessarily something that you want, but you're always getting something from this track. And you're completing goals, you're getting these engine building rewards that make certain things that you do better. There's just every element of the game is benefiting you, giving you one or more benefits, and making you feel good because you're constantly moving forward and getting better stuff. Parks definitely fits into the rewarding game category, and the game never forces you to do anything. And as is the case with any of these games, like, you have to do something in these games. Like, the games just don't let you do whatever you want at any time and give you a chance of winning. You still have goals. You still have these park cards to fulfill. But the game isn't saying, hey, if you don't do this, you don't have a chance at winning. You have lost the game if you don't do this one specific thing every round or anything like that. So Parks, yeah, very solid game for this category of rewarding games. That's my number 8. Number 7 is a game I don't own, but I do enjoy, and that is Space Base. In Space Base, it kind of uses the Catan mechanism where someone on their turn is rolling some dice and activating in Space Base, they're activating cards that correspond with those dice. And the really clever thing I think that the Space Base does is that at the very beginning of the game, you start out with cards representing numbers 1 through 12. So you are fully covered from the very first roll. You're not necessarily hitting one of those numbers because you don't hit those numbers always when it's not your turn. When it's your turn, you are guaranteed to hit something. When it's not your turn, you're not always guaranteed to do that. But almost always, because you have all those cards from the start of the game, you are hitting something. You are getting something based on every roll in the game, and that just feels good. Like in Space Base, you are constantly getting more stuff. And you're getting it not only on your turn, but on other players' turns too, which feels even better. You're not even doing anything, but the things that you've done before, the cards that you've decided to place and buy in your tableau are getting you that stuff. So you feel like you had a part of it, but you're not actually doing anything on someone else's turn when they roll the dice. There's another game on this list that I'll mention that has a similar mechanism, but I love this idea where it's not your turn, but you're getting more stuff, and that feels really, really good. That is Space Base. I almost spoiled my next pick, which is Castles of Burgundy. This is a game that took me a little while to get into because of the aesthetic of it. But at its heart, it's a very rewarding game. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so popular. Everything you get in Castles is good. It's moving you forward. It's giving you more benefits. In Castles of Burgundy, you are kind of doing this dice drafting mechanism, and you're placing tiles in your area. It's not your castle. It's your part of the kingdom. Just everything, all the options that you have in the game are good. You're getting more tiles, you're getting more resources. You can manipulate the dice a little bit. So even when you don't have the exact dice that you want, when you don't roll the dice that you want, you can get what you want by manipulating those dice a little bit. And there's always something to gain. I can't think of any instance in Castles of Burgundy where you have a dead turn or where you're losing points or anything like that. Everything you do feels good and rewarding in Castles of Burgundy, and that's, I think, the reason that I gravitate to it again and again. So that's my number 6, Castles of Burgundy. At number 5 is Clans of Caledonia. This is a game kind of in the vein of Terra Mystica, where you're pulling things off your mat and placing them on this map to control different places on the board and gain stuff from them, gain income from the things that you pulled off your mat. And it's one of these games, I mentioned it on a previous list, where you pretty much just spend money. You get a bunch of money every round, and you spend all that money on whatever you want. And every time you spend that money, you are improving your engine, you're improving your income engine. And you're just constantly getting stuff. Like, the game never punishes you for not doing something. It never says this, at least as far as I can remember. Feel free to correct me if I mess up on any of these games, but I can't think of any negative points that you're getting in Clans of Caledonia. There is different values on the stock market. There are different endgame values based on which resources people have collected during the game. But none of them are negative. None of them are hurting you. They're all going to give you some points. Kind of a point salad aspect of that. You're always getting something, or you are working towards getting something at the end of the game, even if it's not the best thing. I know this is very vague. I'm talking about games in a very vague aspect here, but this isn't a mechanism. This is a kind of a design philosophy here, and Clans of Caledonia, I think, fully embraces that in how rewarding it is. And that's why it's my number 5 on this list. And number 4, big box here, Glenmore 2. Glenmore 2 is another one-way action selection track game where you are selecting any space on the track in front of you and you're choosing that space. You're almost always able to do that. There's a few tiles that have a cost on them, and if you can't afford that cost, you can't get it. But the game even mitigates that by having an open market that you can buy from at any time on your turn. Buy or sell too, really, to get the resources you need, even if they're not resources that you produce. So there's another element, I think, that really elevates some of these games where if there's a primary way of getting something, but you, through randomness or choices or luck, you haven't had access to it, the games give you a backup way to get access to that thing so that you can still get it. And Glenmore definitely does that. Glenmore is also, like many of these games, an engine building game where you're constantly moving forward. You're building this tableau of tiles, and whenever you place a new tile in that tableau, you not only activate the placement benefit on that tile, but you also activate the benefits on all the tiles around it. Potentially 8 tiles around it if you have an empty space in the middle between 8 tiles they've already placed. That feels really good. And while you can get 0 points for certain things in Glenmore because you are comparing your totals of certain things like whiskey barrels to other players, you're not losing points. And it's still not bad to have those whiskey barrels because you can use them for other things in the game. It's kind of one of these games where you need to diversify a little bit, but not so much that you are always in last place in any category. But yeah, again, it's one of these very rewarding games. Everything you do in Glenmore 2 feels good. The game is constantly rewarding you with the things that you're getting and the things that you have access to in the game, namely the tiles, some cards that come out related to those tiles. And actually in Glenmore 2, there's this big board. I hope everything doesn't shift in my box, but I'll flip it around here. There's this big other board over here where you can branch out and get even better benefits throughout the game when you choose people. When you choose tiles that have people on them, you can advance on that board. So yeah, Glenmore 2, a wonderful, very rewarding game at my number 4 slot. At number 3 is a game that I love that I haven't played in a while, but I'm super looking forward to the new deluxe edition, and that is Castles of Mad King Ludwig. This is kind of a classic rewarding game, and it actually has negative points, but not in a way that I think is punishing. In Castles of Mad King Ludwig, you were either taking a turn as a master builder where you're pricing different tiles and people are buying those tiles from you, which feels really good. If you price something in the game, it feels good for players to pay you for those tiles, even though they aren't your tiles. They're paying you. It feels good to have them get paid, and that's the main source of getting income in Castles of Mad King Ludwig. There's also this tile placement. Tile placement is a big part of the game. Whenever you buy a tile, you place it in your castle. And you almost always get an instant benefit, usually points, for placing that tile. And if you complete a room, which you often do when you place a tile, which means that you've closed off all entrances and exits for a certain tile, you then get a completion bonus. So on many turns in castles, you are getting a placement bonus and a completion bonus, and that feels really good. This is that double reward thing that I talked about early on with Scythe. So I think Castles of Mad King Ludwig does that really well. There are some negative points in Ludwig, which is there's certain rooms that say they're activity rooms, I believe. If you have a certain tile next to an activity room, you get some negative points. You lose some points. However, I consider that part of the puzzle of Castles of Mad King Ludwig, not a truly negative part of it. The game isn't punishing you, rather it's incentivizing you to place certain tiles around that tile instead of other tiles. And it kind of balances it out because these activity rooms often have really high built-in point totals. And so just inherently by placing one, you're getting a lot of points. And then you can decide if you want to place tiles around it or not, or to play into that puzzle of which tiles to put around it so that you don't get those negative points. So, I mean, arguably, maybe it should have been on this list, but I think the negative points on those activity rooms are part of the puzzle in Ludwig and not a punishing element of the game. So that's my number 3, Castles of Mad King Ludwig. And number 2 is Rajas of the Ganges. This is a really unique game with a lot of stuff going on, where you are placing workers and then using dice as resources to spend to get various things, including tiles that you're placing on a mat, where you can oftentimes get multiple benefits on that turn. You get a benefit for placing the tile, and if you connect to something around the edges of this mat, really cool mechanism, not used very often in tile placement, but really cool. If you connect these little edge bonuses to the tiles that you place based on the roads, you can't see it in this image here, but if you connect them, you get that benefit as well. So you're often getting a double reward when you place a tile here. Also on the board, I mean, the core mechanism in Rajas, the core win condition, is that you have a track that goes around this way that accounts for your money, which is something that you can actually spend during the game, but you're generally gaining it as if it's a victory point. And then you have fame wrapping around the track this way. You have a token that starts here and here, kind of right near this bottom corner, and they're going in opposite directions, and you win the game by having those tokens meet each other or cross paths on this path. And this is a very rewarding thing because it means that most of the time throughout the game you're gaining either money or fame with many of the different things that you're doing, and you're always moving closer to a victory when you're doing so. And it feels a little different than just victory points. Victory points are more linear where you're moving around a track, but because these two things are constantly moving towards each other, it doesn't matter if you focus on fame or money, because both of them are going to move you closer to victory. Sometimes in games, like, money doesn't actually move you closer to victory. It's just a thing that you gain, a thing that you have to spend. But in Rajas, it's a thing that moves you closer to actually winning the game. So I think that two-way track in Rajas and Rajas Dice, great game as well, add to a really, really rewarding feel in this game, in addition to the tile placement, in addition to all the stuff that you're getting from the board as well. And it's just a wonderful, fun game to play. I love Rajas. That's my number 2. My number 1 is one that I referred to earlier when I was talking about Space Base, and that is Dice Forge. Dice Forge is a game where you are building dice, hence the name Dice Forge. You're actually building these dice. You're popping out plastic pieces from dice and putting in new plastic pieces. And on every player's turn in the game, you are rolling your dice and gaining the resulting benefits. And so on every single turn in the game, you are getting more stuff, even if it's not your turn, even if you can't spend that stuff to get more pieces for your dice or more cards. And it just feels so good. It feels so good to be actively rolling those dice every turn, actively getting stuff every turn, even though it isn't your turn. it just feels really, really great in Dice Forge. It's a super rewarding game. Everything you do moves you forwards, gets you more stuff, builds that engine better with the dice that you're building, and just the fact that you're participating in every turn by rolling your dice and getting stuff, getting the benefits of those dice feels really, really good. So that's my number one, Dice Forge. I think I've covered all the categories here that I wanted to talk about. Oh, actually, there's one other thing that I wanted to mention. Two other things. One is the idea of having plenty of outs. And I kind of mentioned this with Glenmore, where if the primary way of getting something is blocked, that there's a secondary way to get that stuff. And that's the case in Glenmore. That's the case also in Clans of Caledonia. But I like in these games, I think I had another example for it, but I forgot what it is now. But I like in these rewarding games that they... if you're trying to get a certain thing, there are multiple ways to get that thing, multiple outs, multiple ways around the restrictions that the game places on you. I really like that. Same in Castles of Burgundy with the dice mitigation, the dice manipulation. The last thing I wanted to mention, though, is the idea of, is there such a thing as too much good stuff? Like, can a game give you too much good stuff? And I think I have an example of this. I'm sure you can think of others in the comments, but in Scythe, one of the pieces of feedback I got from playtesters and even players of Scythe is that they wish there were more encounters. And I get that. I think the encounter cards in Scythe are fun. In Scythe, when you have an encounter, you either get a free thing or you spend some coins to get something that's even better, or you spend some popularity to get something that's even better. So these encounters aren't ever punishing in any way. It's just your choice of which good thing do you want and are you willing to pay for it. And players like this. And I realized fairly quickly that players like these cards because it's just free stuff that they're getting. And that there is a happy medium. If every space on the Scythe board had an encounter, then that would overwhelm all the other choices that you're making in the game, because you would just go around and get the free stuff all the time. That you would spend every turn doing that. If it was possible. You can't move back-to-back turns in Scythe. But it made me realize that there is maybe not so much such a thing as too much good stuff in general, but too much of one free, easy to get thing can really throw off the balance of the game if you have too much of that one thing. So you can have lots of different pockets of good things that players can get, so that on their turn, even if this one pocket isn't available, they can go to the other 3 or 4 different areas and get something that's really good, that feels really good, rather than just having one thing that's overwhelmingly better than the other areas. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours, your thoughts on rewarding games. Feel free to let me know if I messed up, if any of these games weren't actually eligible for my category of rewarding games. Although it'd be a lot more fun if we talked about games that you feel are rewarding. I think that'll be more interesting to talk about things that you find rewarding, your top rewarding game, your top 3, top 5, top 10 if you want, or the types of things that make you feel good in games, the types of rewards that maybe I haven't delved into today. I'd love to hear your thoughts about them in the comments below. Thanks.